Please stand as we join in singing hymn 438. Sorry, hymn 439 in your blue hymnal. I'm Paul McLean, Associate Director of Pastoral Care here at Calvary, and welcome to the 101st edition of Calvary's Lenten Preaching Series, a gift to our city and to our world, and we're delighted that you're here. I want to ask you to please silence your cell phones or any other devices that you have, and a reminder too that as you leave here, if you haven't done so already, to make your way through our great hall where Thistle and Bee has a pop-up shop along with the Episcopal Bookshop. Books by many of our Lenten Preaching Series authors and other gift items are available there. And then I hope you'll make your way down, if you haven't had lunch yet, to the Waffle Shop, where it's Fish Pudding Day, always a special treat. And it's always a joy to be there. It's like a citywide reunion every week, every day. And we're delighted to be a part of that. It's a pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Scott Morris from Church Health. Scott has been an innovative leader in bringing together the issues of faith and health from his background as a graduate of Yale Divinity School and through his medical degree and the programs that are offered there that are amazing. And he's also been not only interested in the faith and health of individual people, still sees patients, but the faith and health of our city. And he has had great faith in Memphis as exercised by Church Health becoming the anchor tenant of the crosstown development, the renovation of the old Sears Distribution Center. And that development, we were just talking about what an amazing difference that has made in our city. And it's an actual story of what we experienced in Lent, from going to ashes to resurrection. And we're delighted that is making a big difference in reshaping Memphis and the culture and life of our city. Scott will come to deliver his message after this time of centering for us. reading from the Gospel of Luke. Now during those days, Jesus went out to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles: Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. He came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And everyone in the crowd who was trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them.
So I am so grateful for Calvary to keep the Lenten preaching series going for 101 years, and to invite me back to be here, stand in this pulpit, is a true honor. So thank you all. Look, I will turn 70 in less than 2 weeks. I know, I can't believe it either. So I thought I would use this time to talk about how I have come to experience my own place in God's world. How did that come to be? So Baruch Spinoza was a 17th century Dutch Jewish theologian who wrote, "We are afraid of emptiness. We like to occupy, to fill up empty time and space." So I grew up in Atlanta as an only child. When I was a teenager, I think I knew exactly what Spinoza was talking about. You know, I was afraid of emptiness, and I tried my best to fill up that empty time and space. As a teenager, I did it primarily through sports. I would just go from one sports activity to the next. When I went to college, I made it an intellectual pursuit. You know, I couldn't read enough. I couldn't learn enough. And then I chose to go to seminary. And as Paul said, I went to Yale Divinity School, and I was fortunate enough to be there at the same time that Henry Nouwen taught there. The moment I got there, I made myself a Henry Nouwen groupie. Anytime Henry was speaking, I was there. If it was in chapel, I was there. He did communion almost on a daily basis. I'm not saying I went every day, but I went a lot. I took almost every course he offered, including his course on compassion, where I came to understand from Henry that compassion is to care for those who suffer. So in December of 1978, I happened to just run into Henry in the mailroom, and we talked a little bit and just chit-chatting, and then he asked me, "So what are you doing over the Christmas break?" I had no plans. And then he said to me, "Well, you need to go spend a week at Taizé." Look, if Henry Nouwen tells you to go spend a week in Taizé, you go spend a week at Taizé. At the time, I had never heard of Taizé, and I didn't know where it was. I sort of thought maybe it was in, I don't know, upstate New York. But I quickly learned it was in central France. So I had to get out my piggy bank, pull out every penny I had to buy a plane ticket to get there. I had to call to let them know I was coming. Little small problem. I should have thought about this, but in Taizé they speak French. I don't. I figured it out. I get there, and as soon as I get there, they take me into this little small cave in a house, and while there, here's what I learned about Central France in January. It is cold as bejesus. But I get there and I'm supposed to be in silence. You know, those of you who know me, that this is not the stuff that silence is made from. I was introduced to an English-speaking brother who I was asked to talk to for a few minutes once a week, once a day, and then the rest of the time I could go to their chapel services as I was introduced to their chants, one of which we just sang. The rest of the time I was on my own. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I wandered around the grounds of Taizé until I finally engaged a creature that made it possible for me to be there. A cow. This cow was just out in the field, and I talked to her all day, every day. She got me through my week of silence. I then get back to New Haven, and as luck would have it, I run into Henry again in the mailroom. And he asked me, "So, what did you do over the Christmas break?" And I say, "I went to Taizé and spent a week in silence." And then he asked, "So why did you do that?" So look, if you've ever been to my office at Church Health at Crosstown, if you look over the sofa, you will see that I have a painting that hangs there. I brought it with me. This is my cow. And I still talk to it. And it reminds me that there is not just one way to make our way to God. It was a few months after that that I was in the chaplain's office at the Yale Medical School. And I looked on his desk. There was a little pamphlet that said, "How to start a church-based health clinic." And I go, that's it. That's what I want to do. So from that, I went to medical school. I did a residency to be a family doctor. I read somewhere that Memphis was the poorest major city in America, and based on that, I said I was coming to Memphis. I didn't know a soul. I came here, I was 33 years old, to start what would become Church Health. You know, what I knew then, and still know today, is that church health needed to be done for the good of society. It needed to be done for the soul of the church and the broader faith community. But what I needed was for my own search to find God. In 1988, it was just on the early beginnings of the AIDS epidemic. In 1988, we didn't know what caused AIDS. But what we knew, though, is if you were diagnosed with it, you were going to die. It was pretty much a certainty. I remember the very first person I ever saw with AIDS. It was in 1988, and as I was walking into the room, the nurse had written on the door, "AIDS." I screwed up my courage, but I could tell my heart was racing. I was sweating bullets, and I walk in and I talk to this man who was about my age. He pretty much looked like me. As we keep talking, he says to me, "You know, Doc, you can't get it just from talking to me." It was a few weeks after that that I made my first diagnosis of somebody with AIDS. His name was Robert. He was 42 years old. He worked as a yard man for one of our volunteer doctors. He had a huge, wonderful smile. Even though he worked as a landscaper, his hands were so soft. He would hold my hand, and I felt this connection to him. But when I had to tell him that he had AIDS, it was amazing how he took it. I was telling him he was going to die, and he was still smiling. Over the next year, he came regularly because when you have AIDS, especially then, you will get an infection from one thing after the other, and I would treat him with whatever it might be. But again, I came to feel like there was something wrong. He was always too happy. So much so, I sit him down one time and I look him in the face and I say, "Robert, do you understand your problem?" And he looks me back and he says, "I understand my problem. And I know that God loves me." Through Robert, I came to know and believe that God loves me. In Robert, I came to realize that I am a child of God. And I think that is what Nowen had hoped that I might find in silence. But I found it in the work born of compassion to care for those who suffer. Still, there remained in me the need to understand how I was to live my life every day. So Church Health begins in 1987 in one little small house in the corner of Peabody and Bellevue. We grow into 13 buildings. We saw 12 patients the first day. Today, we care for over 80,000 people who depend on Church Health for their health care. On July 8th, 2011, a young art historian, Todd Richardson, sitting in the back there, came to talk to me about the idea that he and his artist friends had of turning this building, built in 1927, that had been abandoned since 1992. It gotten to be where it was surrounded in barbed wire. There are 3,200 windows. Every last one was broken. Why would gangs write anything else on the building? What more was there to say? He and his artist friends thought, this is the perfect building to repurpose, to build what he was referring to then and we refer to now as a vertical urban village built around health, education, and the arts. Who wouldn't want to invest in that? All he wanted from Church Health was for us to have a little small 3,000-foot clinic. But what I said to Todd is, well, what if we move in there with you? So I married one crazy idea with another crazy idea, and then together, not just us, but so many others, we built what now has 52 entities that call the place home, 265 apartments. They're all rented. However, it's not always how I want it to be. There's one person that has been there pretty much from the beginning, which was in 2017, and every day I see him, these days I try to avoid him as much as I can, because what I know is that if I ask him, "How are you doing?" what he will say to me is, "It's just another day in paradise." I don't experience the world as every day being a day in paradise. It's more complicated than that. And I think that attitude is what turns many people off from church. Where is the real experience of life in that kind of always positive expression? When the pandemic happened, I think many churches came to realize that there is a hollowness in such a message. Just like there's a hollowness if your church is only worried about the light bill and how to pay the mortgage. There has to be more to ministry if that is who we are. In my own life, I was the associate pastor at St. John's Methodist Church for 30 years. I decided that no church should have to have a pastor for more than 30 years. So when we moved across town, in the Methodist Church, you can take what's called an appointment beyond the local church. John Wesley said, "The world is my parish," and I chose to live into that message. And so these days, Church Health and Crosstown, that's where I feel like I'm the pastor. And I've come to feel like the community that gets expressed there connects me to God in very powerful ways. So rather than seeing every day as paradise, I prefer Frederick Buechner's approach. When Buechner says, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Be not afraid." There will always be challenges in life. The question is, how do we approach what stands before us? For much of my life, when faced with such challenges and the problems that occur, I sought to answer them in a very repetitive way. So my instinct when faced with the problem is to go and solve it. I give it my best. And then if I can't solve the problem, I will turn to my friends, my community, my colleagues at Church Health, and we will give it our best. And if that doesn't work, I turn to prayer. And I pray, "Dear God, get me out of this mess that I caused." But as I read the Bible, and I actually do read the Bible, in the passage that Paul just read, the way it works for Jesus is how it works in that passage. Jesus begins with prayer. He then turns to his community, and then through compassionate care, they attract the problem. In my own life, I begin every day at 6 a.m. I have my own form of prayer, meditation. A lot of it has to do with reading about the tigers and the grizzlies. And then I will read Richard Rohr's daily meditation. And somewhere in there, calling on God through prayer is part of it. And then I go to that community that I'm now a pastor for. And then from there, I go to work, trying to exhibit and live into what compassionate care looks like. It is in the experience of compassionate care where I am most likely to find God. When the snow came 4 or 5 whatever weeks ago, there was no question that Church Health would be open. In the 37 years that we've been around, no matter what the weather, there has always been at least one patient through illness or injury who came to our door. And that was the case just a few weeks ago. It's how I met Susie. She had fallen and hurt her knee. Her knee injury that day wasn't that bad, but she had other problems, and she's going to need surgery on it. Through the way Church Health works, a volunteer orthopedist will do her surgery on her knee in a few weeks. But the reason she had fallen is because she couldn't see 20 feet. She has these thick cataracts in her eyes. So here's how it works. If you're poor and you're having a heart attack and you go to the emergency room, you'll get a bypass operation. If you're poor and you're going blind and you go to the ER, nobody gives a flip. So we at Church Health, as we speak, are building a second eye clinic to address the 4 leading causes of blindness: diabetic retinopathy, macular degeneration, glaucoma, and cataracts. What I knew that day I could do for Susie is add her on to the list for this last Saturday for our Cataractathon. That's hard to say. Cataractathon at Memphis Eye and Cataract Associates. One after one after one this last Saturday. Ophthalmologists donating their time, along with staff of every ilk, seeing patients who walked in there essentially blind. I mean, what could be more biblical than you take the poor who are blind and give them their sight back? Just before she was taken back, I got a chance to get to know Susie a little better. Turns out that she works and has for the last 10 years with people who are intellectually disabled, helping them get through the day of living. That's the same thing that Henry Nouwen did for the last 10 years of his life in Canada. And then she told me that she's hoping to get married soon to a man who has been chasing her for 40 years. She's only been interested the last 5. But she decided that she wasn't going to get married until she was able to look him in the face. Maybe to be sure. But the ophthalmologist texted me on Monday telling me that her visual acuity is now 20/25. I think there will be wedding bells soon. So that's how it works for me. How I know God. These days, I mostly avoid Spinoza's emptiness. I'm not going to say that there aren't days when the emptiness threatens to take over. There are. But that's why the cow hangs on my office. And why, even after 70, I will keep seeing patients. But I am at all times committed in knowing that God loves me as a child, just as He loves you. And if you're not sure about it, if you would like to come talk to my cow sometime, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Scott will be at our front steps to greet you as you go. As a compassionate community, let us bless the Lord.